Tanager is here for children, teens, young adults, and families as they navigate the many stressors of the world today. Tanager inspires, empowers, and heals by providing tools and support needed to navigate the hardships of life and overcome obstacles. Our expertise and specialty trainings offer a wide range of approaches, and we'll join alongside you to create solutions to enhance your wellness. We are here for you and your family. Tanager, inspire, empower, heal.
Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series based on the RISE Wellness and Resilience Framework. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this show is a series digging deep and bearing witness to the stories regarding challenges that youth and vulnerable populations face within systems in our community. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility to create a ripple effect, empowering community action and encouraging you to recognize the power of advocacy. The power of your voice can be a shining light, promoting change in systems that can better offer resilience and wellness in the life of youth and families. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of barriers, we offer a bright place, inspiring ourselves and others to recognize that hope is possible and to not give up, because the youth of today and future generations need us. Together we can rise. Welcome, Max. Thank you so much for being here with us and a part of this initiative. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I'm Max Mowitz. My pronouns are they and he, and I am the program director at One Iowa. I was actually born and raised in Iowa, so I'm so happy to be back here after a little bit of time in Illinois in my undergrad. I was born and raised in Des Moines, and I started doing LGBTQ advocacy work when I was 17. I came out as a lesbian and started doing work with a local LGBTQ youth advocacy organization, which really empowered me and taught me about how to advocate for the community. I then went to school in Illinois and did advocacy work throughout my time there. And so when I graduated, I had a moment of clarity, and I realized, instead of staying in Illinois, I knew that I wanted to go back to Des Moines, wanted to go back to Iowa to do advocacy work for the LGBTQ community. So I moved on back, and I actually worked at a wonderful organization called the Young Women's Resource Center in downtown Des Moines before taking on this role at One Iowa. And it's really funny, and it feels like a full circle moment to work at One Iowa, because I actually worked with One Iowa as a volunteer when I was like 14 or 15 when we were fighting for marriage equality. So it was a full circle moment to now get to work on the staff and work as the program director.
Well, thankful that you came back to Iowa and all the advocacy that you do. This show is all about bringing to light awareness so that community members can see some of the barriers in place and advocate or use their voice, use their resources. So tell me a little bit about what you see as some of the biggest need right now for LGBTQ youth, families, community members.
Well, I would say right now, when we're looking at the LGBTQ community, especially youth, what I think of is the word safety. LGBTQ youth need to feel safe, especially in Iowa, especially in rural parts of Iowa. And so that is the thing that I'm always thinking about, and that's always guiding my work. I think that especially right now, when we're seeing a lot of anti-LGBTQ bills at the Capitol, safety is top of mind because these LGBTQ youth are being stripped of their safety.
So tell me a little bit from your perception what safety means. At Tanager here, we talk a lot about safety, especially in regards to our RISE Wellness and Resilience Framework, because it is one of the 4 elements of our indicators of well-being, which means if you don't have a sense of safety in your life and in your world, it's really hard to have your fullest capability of wellness. So tell me safety. When you say safety, what does that mean for these youth?
Yeah, I think of safety in a couple of different ways. The first is that micro level safety, that community safety and safety within your family. So we need spaces, of course, like Tanager Place, but also families and communities that are affirming to LGBTQ youth. And this can be everything from something as small as having a rainbow flag in your business to affirming someone's pronouns or name if they are trans, non-binary, or gender diverse. This can include coming and speaking out against anti-LGBTQ legislation or putting on LGBTQ specific programming. So I think of it in terms of the family and the community. We know from statistics from the Trevor Project that when LGBTQ youth, specifically trans and non-binary youth, have at least one person in their life that will use their correct name and pronouns, we see their rates of suicidal ideation go down dramatically. So we know that those little pieces, those day-to-day interactions with LGBTQ youth creates that sense of safety. And then I think macro level, right? Yeah. So how do we create a state that is safe enough for LGBTQ youth to thrive and want to stay here, want to live in Iowa and have families here as well? So when I think about that, I think about our larger institutions, our schools, I think about the legislation down at the Capitol, and I think about the ways that different communities are talking about LGBTQ folks as well.
Yeah, what great points. I really appreciate those perspectives because I think a lot of people feel like, oh, maybe I can't do anything. And so when you even mentioned just having a flag or all are welcome or inclusive space, just how some of the even assumingly little things can make such a big difference in making someone feel seen and accepted for just who they are. You mentioned the Capitol, you mentioned legislation, and it's legislation session right now, and there are a lot of things in place that are scary for LGBTQ youth that are happening and potential to happen. Tell me a little bit about that and the advocacy work that you're doing and how others could get involved as well.
Yeah, so at One Iowa, we are actually a 501c3 organization, so we don't do legislative work, but our organization, One Iowa Action, is our 501c4 organization, and they are down at the Capitol every day. I always have to shout out my coworker, Keenan Crow, who is our Director of Policy and Advocacy, who is really fighting the fight day in and day out, and I'm so grateful and honored to get to work alongside them. So the things that we're looking at the Capitol are strategic bills that focus on stripping trans youth of their rights. Everything from their ability to access the bathroom to them having access to gender-affirming care. So that would include hormone replacement therapy and things like that. And so these are all things we're paying attention to. And so when we're looking at legislation, we're looking at what legislation is going to be most harmful for the most vulnerable LGBTQ individuals. And so much of the legislation we see right now is focused on trans youth because they are the most marginalized and they are unable to vote. And so it is what we believe a testing ground. We believe that these bills are testing the waters for what legislators can get away with, and we know that if they take rights away from trans youth, that other members of the LGBTQ community are next. So it's part of a larger nationwide campaign against trans youth.
To me, just hearing you talk, Max, it's just scary and it's sad. And it's because for me, just wearing a real clear mental health lens, right? And hearing you say some of these things, I think, oh goodness, a lot of these youth then are going to naturally then have more barriers in place to their mental health, barriers in place to their resilience, more barriers in place to just living a whole life where they can authentically just navigate the world simply as who they are. And the ripple effect of that, is that if our kids aren't well, all kids aren't well, how are our communities well? Even if my kid isn't identifying as LGBTQ, they're possibly in school with someone who is, and if that kid isn't well, that's directly influencing the entire community. But a lot of this stuff seems to stem out of fear, maybe lack of awareness. What do you think we need to be doing as a community to kind of disarm some of that fear and show up as humans, human to human, and just be in relationship and inclusive for who we are?
I want to, before I answer your question, speak to something that you touched on, which is that this is keeping LGBTQ youth from mental health, from feeling mentally healthy, from feeling like they're part of a community. If we think about it, if we have trans youth have to use a separate bathroom, they're not going to feel like they are a part of their peer group, right? They're going to feel isolated and ostracized. When we have trans youth not be able to access gender affirming care, that directly negatively impacts their mental health, because we know that things like gender dysphoria can increase suicidal ideation. And the thing that we are often fighting for is to keep trans kids alive, right? So the stakes are really, really high. But I also think that this legislation does impact non-LGBTQ youth as well, because they are looking at their state, they're looking at the people in power, and they're saying, well, they are taking this stance against LGBTQ youth, so why should I be an ally to them? So we're also teaching people from a very young age that it's okay to ostracize and to cast out folks that are different from us, which is negative for our communities and our communities in Iowa moving forward into the next generation. So that's something that came up for me when you were chatting. But you also just asked a little bit about what we can be doing, and I would say that everything from those small pieces of being affirming, being that one safe person for an LGBTQ kiddo or an LGBTQ family is really important. But the other thing that I think a lot about is standing up and taking a stance as an organization, as an individual, and talking to your coworkers, talking to your employer, talking to your family members. We really need a village, right? It takes a village to raise a bunch of LGBTQ youth in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, the word that keeps coming up in my mind is kind of bias, unconscious bias, or, not fully understanding. And when we don't understand, lots of times then we just push away. And you said something about being more whole as a community, and everything that I read and look at says that the more diversity we have in a community, the more whole we are, When you think of that, where are additional gaps, whether it's in school systems, beyond just this current legislation in place? What are other barriers that are holding us back from being more inclusive?
I think schools are, I should say, one area that we obviously focus on, but we also need better infrastructure in terms of mental health. And that's for all kiddos, all adults. We have a mental health crisis in the state of Iowa. So I think often of that. When it comes to the other barriers, I think that Iowa is also a state that doesn't feel safe or affirming to folks of color, to folks that are disabled. And so I think that's also really important, because when we talk about LGBTQ youth, the youth that are often lifted up in these narratives are white. So how is this impacting LGBTQ youth of color? LGBTQ youth that are not only experiencing transphobia and homophobia, but also racism, xenophobia, things like that. So when I think about how we can think about these issues, it's not just schools, it's not just families, but it's also looking at these larger systems of oppression that are at play in the state of Iowa and how we are dismantling them in all areas of our community.
A lot of times when we lack some awareness, we don't want to get things wrong. We don't want to be offensive, right? We call it the Midwest nice, but lots of times that Midwest nice can oftentimes create divisions or lack inclusion because we simply don't lean into discomfort. We don't lean into curiosity. We don't lean into say, I am inherently racist. I don't know everything about the pronouns, and so I might mess up. And when I do, please let me know if I'm messing up, because I don't want to mess up. How do we grow towards that?
Yeah. I think the thing that I always talk about, especially in trainings that I give, is show up as a human. These systems that divide us, this legislation that divides us and makes us think that, I'm a trans person, but it makes, cisgender folks feel like trans people are different or other. that legislation, that culture dehumanizes both cisgender and transgender people. It dehumanizes both straight people and lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, right? And makes us feel like we are parts of separate communities that are not intertwined. And so when you show up as a human and you interact with that other person that's different from you as a human, that's where we see those beautiful conversations come up and that shared understanding. One example of this is I always recommend that folks, if they get someone's pronouns wrong, they apologize. And that apology can be genuine and authentic. It doesn't have to be a scramble to apologize enough or over apologize, but really it has to be, I see you as a human, I messed up, I'm really sorry. You know, and that also relieves you as a person that's learning about a community that you're not a part of to make a mistake and to show up as a human and say, oh shoot, I messed up. What can I do now? You know, so I think getting in touch with our humanness, our humanity, I should say, is really essential to bonding with other organizations, other communities that are different from you, and moving towards a shared liberation.
Yeah. Everything you talk about really aligns well with an element in the RISE framework called a sense of connection and belonging. Mm-hmm. You know, for us to be well, we need a sense of safety, we need a sense of connection and belonging, meaning and purpose. My life matters, I have value in this world, and a sense of efficacy. You know, when I think about those four elements, and that really wraps around someone's life to say, you know, when you have these indicators, you're more likely to be well. And when I think about those four indicators, all of them are at jeopardy for LGBTQ youth and families. Like, that's scary to me. How do we create systems or spaces that do have a greater sense of belonging for them, that say your life matters, that your life has purpose, even if you are different than your next door neighbor who is more accepted in our standard Iowa culture?
When we have individuals that are being marginalized, especially legislatively, but also beyond, that hurts all of us. That hurts our communities. That keeps people separate and isolated. That impacts not only the mental health, like we said earlier, of the transgender individual, but also of their peers. I think that we really need to think in terms of the collective community and recognize that none of us are free unless we're all free. And that's always what I think of. Who is the person not at the table right now? Who is the person that's missing? Who is the person that's getting punched down at? And how do we lift that person up, or those folks or that community up?
Yeah, you know, when you talk about that, I think about Ubuntu, which, you know, is a big thing that we talk about and honor here at Tanager. And, you know, for those listeners who may not know what Ubuntu is, you know, this idea that I am because we are, right? That we rise by being together, right? And this concept, you know, it really comes out of African culture, and this anthropologist was with a group of kids and said, hey, run down to this tree, and whoever could get to the tree the fastest, all the fruit is at the bottom, you get all the fruit for yourself. And he said, go, and all the children stood up, they held hands, and they went down together and enjoyed the fruit together. And the anthropologist had asked, why did you all go together when one of you could have had more fruit than the other? And the children said, Ubuntu, right? How can I be happy if those around me are not? And so when you talk about this collective whole, it is showing up in spaces believing that we are only as good as the person most struggling.
Yes.
What are some of the strengths? What are things that we have done well in the last maybe 5 years that give us hope that we can continue to move forward in a positive direction?
Well, one of the things that gives me hope that you just spoke to is that kids don't actually want this. Kids want to lift up their peers. Kids are really quick to get someone's pronouns. I think that that's really important to keep in mind. And I think that Youth are always community-minded. That's how we were born, and they have that in them. So I find that youth are the ones that are the most affirming of their LGBTQ peers, and they're always the ones that are standing up. I mean, today at the Capitol, we are looking at a rally that is put on by LGBTQ youth, folks under the age of 24, to show up for each other. I think that that is huge. When we look at the school walkouts that took place last week, those are youth that are standing up for their LGBTQ peers. That's powerful. So that gives me hope. That's our future generation in Iowa, and they're going to show up, they're going to vote, they are going to be engaged in their communities, and they're going to shape their communities. So that is very exciting to me. But I think in the last 5 years, one thing that we have done is we have formed stronger coalitions, community connections, and we are continuing to connect with each other throughout the state of Iowa. We see other organizations pop up like Iowa Queer Student Alliance, that is an organization that connects LGBTQ youth throughout the state of Iowa, and that is powerful. So when I think of what gives me hope, what we're doing well, I see that collective action, I see that community-minded connection, and I see the future of the state of Iowa as being very powerful and very liberation-oriented.
That is hopeful, you know, and when you talk, it just makes me think about my own home environment, my own kiddos, you know, how we can collectively be making a difference. You know, it makes me think about books in school, especially for elementary age kids, and their natural ability to accept and love one another, even, you know, being different. And we have several affirming books in our house, and I know our school district has some affirming books available, and there's lots of controversy about that. You know, in particular, if there are some parents who say, I don't want my kids exposed to this. What's the benefit of being exposed though, Mac?
Well, when kiddos and youth are exposed to different cultures and different ways of living when they're young, they are able to understand and learn about those communities with a more open mind. Like I said, I think that youth are very open-minded, they are very connected to their peers, and so when they can see folks that are different like that, different than them, I should say, that's very powerful. So from my perspective, it's so important that youth are connected with these new ideas because they are going to meet folks of color. Even if you live in a very white town, there are folks of color that are being marginalized in your communities. There are LGBTQ people that are being marginalized in your communities. There are disabled people that are being marginalized. So when we don't talk to our children and our youth about race, LGBTQ issues, ability, we are keeping them from living their fullest life, and we are doing them a disservice because we are keeping them from being able to connect with their community members and their peers.
You know, and I think we can all agree, you know, we want kids to grow up being kind. You know, I think of the 3 common words I hear all the time: kind, caring, and respectful. Kind, caring, and respectful. So it sometimes seems ironic to me that we wouldn't have these inclusive practices or inclusive books to teach from a young age what kindness truly is, because kindness isn't just about listening to the teacher and doing what you're told. It's about navigating the world with an open heart. It's about being able to live in a community where there is diversity and see the beauty in that. Max, what else do you want to share with us? You know, as we look to wrap up the interview, what is important for you to share?
Well, the first thing that I am thinking about connects with something that you mentioned earlier, and that is that when we don't talk to LGBTQ youth, when we don't talk to other youth about issues of identity, they are still noticing those things. So a lot of the time when we are looking at Don't Say Gay and Don't Say Trans bills that have popped up as well, we have to remember that if we don't talk to our youth about gender identity and sexual orientation, they're noticing that all around them. And so when we don't talk to youth about lesbian, gay, and bisexual people or transgender people, and they go to a gender reveal party, they are being exposed to gender identity. It's just in a way that shows them what is okay and acceptable, so that later when they become engaged or involved with a peer that's transgender, they don't know anything about that person and they think that that person is an other, and they isolate and ostracize that person. So even if you don't talk to your youth about sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, they are exposed to that all of the time. So we want to give them the resources and support that they need to support those communities. So that's something that I think a lot about. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and I feel like I talk about this all the time, if any of us is suffering, if any of us is marginalized, we are all marginalized. Just to speak to what I mentioned before, we have to view this as a collective effort. We have to view it intersectionally. I really can't be okay with LGBTQ spaces that are racist, for example, or spaces that say that they're LGBTQ affirming, but they don't think about issues of ability or fat phobia or things like that. We have to view it all as interconnected. And so often we see racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia rampant in spaces that are supposed to be about collective liberation. So I think that everyone being in that lifelong process of dealing with our own biases. Thank you. Dealing with our own biases and taking that on as an individual is so important, and I think that gets back to the main point that we've talked about today, which is to show up as a human, understand your life experiences, understand how those inform your actions every single day, and learn and strive to do better. So that is something that pops up for me a lot, and finally, I am so excited for the next generation of Iowans. They are amazing, they are excited, they are standing up for their peers, and I am so excited to see what happens next.
Yeah. Max, so beautifully said. I just want to thank you so much for being here, for your advocacy, for the ongoing work that you do. I have no doubt that it is a ripple effect and will benefit generations to come and make Iowa a more whole, better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager is here for you. Our team of specialists in mental, emotional, behavioral, and social health want to join alongside you during these tough times. Tanager will offer the tools needed to inspire, empower, and heal, while providing the support you need to build the strongest foundation for success and wellness. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager. Inspire, empower, heal.
With something like non-suicidal self-injury, the person engaging in it is engaging in that behavior because they're in pain, because they're trying to cope with experiences that they don't know or they don't have effective means of coping with. Our goal is simply to help them identify those and connect with those so that they can live a happy, healthy, and full life.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together, we'll define a path to meet your goals. Together we rise. Tanager.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website at www.tanagerplace.org.
Being a teenager is hard enough. Finding places to fit in, overcoming fears, and dealing with the stress of finding acceptance can be overwhelming. The LGBTQ Center at Tanager provides a safe and confidential environment for LGBTQ youth, families, and allies. Programs at the center are diverse and include support groups, mentoring programs, parent workshops, tutoring, and so much more. Meet new people and build a support network at the center. To learn more, visit tanagerplace.org. Tanager. Inspire, empower, heal.